Welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating world of forensic psychology. In this video, we'll explore real-life case studies that highlight the crucial role psychologists play in the criminal justice system. Forensic psychology bridges the gap between psychology and law, helping courts understand the minds behind crimes. From assessing competency to stand trial to profiling offenders, forensic psychologists are key players in solving complex cases. Throughout this journey, we'll see how psychological insights can influence investigations, court decisions, and even rehabilitation. Let's begin by understanding what forensic psychology truly entails and why it's so vital in today's world. Forensic psychologists wear many hats. They assess mental competency, provide expert testimony, and help law enforcement agencies with criminal profiling. Their expertise is often called upon in both civil and criminal cases, ranging from custody disputes to murder trials. By evaluating suspects and victims, they help courts make informed decisions. Their work doesn't stop at the courtroom. They also assist in rehabilitation and risk assessment for offenders. Understanding their multifaceted role sets the stage for the case studies we'll explore next. One of the most well-known intersections of psychology and law is the insanity defense. In this case study, a defendant was charged with a violent crime but claimed insanity at the time of the offense. Forensic psychologists were brought in to assess the individual's mental state. Through interviews, psychological testing, and reviewing medical history, they determined whether the defendant understood the nature of their action. Their findings played a pivotal role in the court's decision, illustrating how psychological expertise can impact legal outcomes. Another critical area is determining whether a defendant is competent to stand trial. In this case, a young adult was accused of a serious crime, but concerns arose about their ability to understand the proceedings. Forensic psychologists conducted evaluations to assess cognitive functioning and comprehension. Their detailed reports helped the judge decide if the trial could proceed, or if the defendant required treatment first. This process ensures that justice is served fairly and ethically. Forensic psychologists are also involved in civil cases, such as child custody disputes. In one case, both parents claimed to be the better caregiver. Psychologists conducted interviews, home visits, and psychological testing to assess the family dynamics. Their recommendations based on the child's best interests were presented in court. These evaluations help judges make informed decisions that prioritize the well-being of children. Criminal profiling is a fascinating aspect of forensic psychology. In a high-profile serial crime case, psychologists analyzed crime scenes, victimology, and behavioral patterns to create a profile of the unknown offender. Their insights helped law enforcement narrow down suspects and eventually led to an arrest. Profiling combines psychological theory with investigative techniques, making it a powerful tool in solving complex cases. Witness testimony can be crucial in court, but it's not always reliable. In this case, a witness's account conflicted with physical evidence. Forensic psychologists evaluated the factors that might have influenced memory, such as stress or suggestion. Their findings highlighted the limitations of human memory and the importance of corroborating evidence. This case underscores the need for psychological expertise in evaluating testimony. Juveniles are involved in criminal cases. Forensic psychologists assess their mental health, maturity, and risk of reoffending. In one case, a teenager was charged with a serious offense. Psychologists evaluated their background, family environment, and psychological state. Their recommendations influenced sentencing, focusing on rehabilitation rather than punishment. This approach aims to give young offenders a chance to reform. Before releasing offenders on parole or probation, forensic psychologists evaluate the risk of reoffending. In a notable case, a psychologist assessed an inmate's behavior, treatment progress, and support system. Their risk assessment report helped the parole board decide whether to grant release. This process balances public safety with the opportunity for reintegration. False confessions can lead to wrongful convictions. In this case, a suspect confessed under intense interrogation, but forensic psychologists questioned the validity of the confession. They analyzed the interrogation techniques and the suspect's psychological vulnerability. Their findings revealed that certain methods can lead to coerced or false confessions, prompting a review of police procedures. Forensic psychologists also work with victims, assessing the psychological impact of crimes. In one case, they evaluated a victim's trauma following a violent assault. Their reports were used in court to inform sentencing and support services. These assessments ensure that victims' voices are heard and their needs addressed within the justice system. Expert testimony from forensic psychologists can sway court decisions. In a high-profile trial, a psychologist explained complex psychological concepts to the jury, helping them understand the defendant's mental state. Their clear communication bridged the gap between science and law, ensuring that psychological evidence was properly considered. In cases of unexplained deaths, forensic psychologists may conduct psychological autopsies. By reviewing the deceased's mental health history, interviews with family, and other records, they help determine whether a death was accidental, suicidal, or homicidal. This process provides closure for families and assists law enforcement in their investigations. Lingering or faking mental illness is a challenge in forensic settings. In one case, a defendant claimed severe psychological symptoms to avoid trial. Forensic psychologists use specialized tests and interviews to detect inconsistencies. Their expertise ensured that only genuine cases received appropriate attention, maintaining the integrity of the justice process. Evaluating sex offenders requires specialized knowledge. In a sensitive case, forensic psychologists assess the risk of reoffending and treatment needs. Their comprehensive reports informed sentencing and rehabilitation plans, aiming to protect the public while addressing the offender's psychological issues. Forensic psychologists play a vital role in domestic violence cases. In one instance, they assessed both the victim's trauma and the perpetrator's risk of future violence. Their findings helped the court issue protective orders and recommend interventions. This holistic approach supports both safety and rehabilitation. Stalking cases often involve complex psychological dynamics. Forensic psychologists assess the stalker's motivations and the impact on victims. In one case, their evaluation led to a restraining order and recommendations for treatment. Their work helps protect victims and address underlying issues in offenders. Some jurisdictions have specialized mental health courts. In these settings, forensic psychologists assess defendants with mental illnesses and recommend treatment plans. In one case, a defendant avoided jail by participating in a court-ordered treatment program. This approach aims to reduce recidivism and support recovery. Forensic psychologists are involved in civil commitment hearings, where courts decide if someone should be hospitalized for mental health reasons. In a notable case, psychologists evaluated the risk of harm to self or others. Their testimony helped the court make a decision that balanced individual rights with public safety. Witnesses to traumatic events may experience psychological distress. Forensic psychologists assess their ability to testify and the impact of trauma. In one case, a key witness received support and accommodations, ensuring their testimony was both reliable and humane. This process respects the mental health needs of all participants in the justice system. Forensic psychologists sometimes assess police officers involved in shootings or high-stress incidents. In one case, an officer's mental health was evaluated after a traumatic event. The psychologists report guided decisions about return to duty and support services, ensuring both officer well-being and public trust. In the aftermath of mass disasters, forensic psychologists help assess survivors and responders. In one case, they provided crisis intervention and evaluated long-term psychological needs. Their work supports recovery and resilience in communities facing tragedy. Elderly defendants may face unique challenges in court. Forensic psychologists assess cognitive decline, dementia, and capacity to participate in legal proceedings. In one case, their evaluation ensured that an elderly defendant received appropriate accommodations, upholding fairness in the justice process. In cases involving child welfare, forensic psychologists assess a parent's fitness to care for their children. In one case, concerns about substance abuse and mental health prompted a thorough evaluation. The psychologist's recommendations guided court decisions about custody and support services. Veterans involved in legal cases may suffer from PTSD. Forensic psychologists assess the impact of trauma on behavior and legal responsibility. In one case, a veteran's diagnosis influenced sentencing and access to treatment, highlighting the importance of understanding mental health in the justice system. Historic cases, such as those involving childhood abuse, require careful evaluation of memory. Forensic psychologists assess the reliability of long-term recollections and the potential for false memories. Their expertise helps courts weigh the evidence in cases where events occurred many years ago. Children are particularly vulnerable to suggestion during interviews. Forensic psychologists assess the suggestibility of child witnesses to ensure their statements are reliable. In one case, their evaluation prevented the use of improperly obtained testimony, protecting the integrity of the trial. Predicting future violence is a challenging task. Forensic psychologists use structured tools to assess risk factors in offenders. In one case, their evaluation influenced security measures and supervision levels, aiming to prevent harm and promote rehabilitation. Defendants with severe mental illness may experience delusions that affect their understanding of reality. Forensic psychologists assess the presence and impact of these symptoms. In one case, their findings led to a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, emphasizing the importance of accurate diagnosis. Defendants must understand their rights to make informed decisions. Forensic psychologists assess whether individuals have the capacity to waive rights, such as the right to remain silent. In one case, their evaluation ensured that a confession was obtained legally and ethically. In capital cases, forensic psychologists may be asked to assess whether a defendant is fit for execution. This involves evaluating mental health and understanding of the punishment. In one case, their findings led to a stay of execution, highlighting the ethical responsibilities of the justice system. Some defendants claim amnesia to avoid responsibility. Forensic psychologists use tests and interviews to determine if memory loss is genuine. In one case, their evaluation exposed feigned amnesia, ensuring that justice was served based on facts. Media coverage can influence public perception and even jury decisions. Forensic psychologists assess the impact of pretrial publicity on potential jurors. In one case, their findings led to a change of venue, ensuring a fair trial. Cultural factors can affect behavior and legal outcomes. Forensic psychologists assess cultural competence in evaluations, ensuring that cultural background is considered. In one case, their insights helped the court understand the defendant's actions in context, promoting fairness. Substance abuse can complicate legal cases. Forensic psychologists assess the role of drugs or alcohol in criminal behavior. In one case, their evaluation influenced sentencing and treatment recommendations, addressing both legal and health concerns. Predicting the likelihood of reoffending is a key task for forensic psychologists. In one case, structured risk assessment tools were used to evaluate an offender's chances of recidivism. Their findings informed parole decisions and supervision plans, aiming to reduce future crime. False memory syndrome can affect witness testimony and legal outcomes. Forensic psychologists assess the possibility of implanted or distorted memories. In one case, their evaluation prevented a wrongful conviction, demonstrating the importance of psychological expertise. Forensic psychologists may assess individuals for high-stress occupations such as law enforcement or emergency services. In one case, psychological testing determines suitability for a demanding role, ensuring both individual well-being and public safety. Offenders may have histories of trauma that influence their behavior. Forensic psychologists assess the impact of past abuse or neglect. In one case, their findings informed sentencing and rehabilitation, promoting a more compassionate approach to justice. In guardianship cases, forensic psychologists assess an individual's capacity to make decisions. In one case, their evaluation determined whether a person could manage their own affairs or needed a guardian. Their expertise ensures that vulnerable individuals are protected. Brain injuries can affect behavior and legal responsibility. Forensic psychologists assess cognitive and emotional changes following injury. In one case, their findings influenced both criminal responsibility and access to rehabilitation services. Defendants with intellectual disabilities require careful evaluation. Forensic psychologists assess cognitive functioning and adaptive skills. In one case, their evaluation ensured that legal proceedings were fair and appropriate accommodations were provided. Autism spectrum disorders can affect communication and behavior in legal settings. Forensic psychologists assess the impact of these disorders on defendants' understanding and participation. In one case, their findings guided courtroom accommodations and sentencing. Personality disorders can complicate legal cases. Forensic psychologists assess the presence and influence of these disorders on behavior. In one case, their evaluation informed both sentencing and treatment, ensuring that psychological factors were considered. As we've seen, forensic psychologists play a vital role in the justice system. Their expertise ensures that legal decisions are informed by science and compassion. From assessing competency to evaluating trauma, their work touches every aspect of the law. By understanding the minds behind the cases, forensic psychology helps create a more just and humane society. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of real case studies in forensic psychology.